Hey there folks, Santee at the Arizona Ghostriders here. We got mail. Santee, could you please do a video on restaurants in the Old West? Luke Nickel. We can do that. On the wild frontier, our pioneers were hard at work being successful at their endeavors. Farmers, ranchers, soldiers, miners, businessmen, and women. Well, in order to do that, you gotta fuel up on food. Those who lived outside of a town took almost all of their meals at their homestead, but the town dwellers, maybe not so much. If you lived in a boarding house, there's a good chance you would eat there with the other guests. Although it was convenient, it was not always the better option, as written by a Utah boarding house resident.
The pudding had the Jim Jams. The pies were in disguise. The beans came to the table with 500,000 flies. The hash was simply murdered, just as hard as Dobie mud. We howl, we wail, our muscles fail on Baxter's awful grub.
Restaurants were smart businesses in a town. You would get travelers and well-to-do business folk on a consistent basis. Having one in a hotel was even more advantageous, as you were sure to get the guests coming in for a meal. As was the case in 1882 Silverton, Colorado, where the Grand Hotel encompassed a dining hall. Later on, the American Cafe went in there, and even today, the historic building still has a restaurant. Let's not forget Saloons. Early on, they started feeding people basic fare like sow belly, bread, overcooked beef, and even rattlesnake. For the restaurant tour, most of the fresh menu items could be purchased locally, and health codes weren't a thing yet. So, as long as you could cook pretty well and patrons didn't die from what you made, you would be a great success.
Go get your milk.
Why not?
It's spoiled.
Oh, spoiled nothing. You kids put that milk on your mush and eat it.
Elegant dining, like today, was reserved for those wanting a real fancy meal in a high-class establishment. You were expected to dress appropriately. However, we've talked about the fact that Victorian society tended to be more formal, so it probably wasn't a big deal.
Can't you read the sign? No? Get out.
Let's just hope the waiter was patient with those outspoken hard cases. In the 1880s, French cuisine was popular on the coasts, which made its way to the west. Now pioneers were experiencing fancy sauces and different flavor profiles.
Well, forget the apples. Slap some bacon on a biscuit and let's go.
Chinese food was also very prominent. Remember, not only were they railroad workers and miners, but also very industrious, not to mention making a fantastic plate of food. Oysters were shipped in from the coast via train, and it was quite a delicacy. Most cowboys trying them probably had no idea what one was, but sampled them happily. Salmon was also very popular, like today, as were locally grown vegetables and wild game. Ellen Nellie Cashman was one of the great philanthropists and restaurateurs of the 19th century West.
Mayo, kiss my grits.
Although her travels took her all over, she's known in Arizona for restaurants in half a dozen cities, including the Russ House in Tombstone. Nowadays, you rarely see the same fare on the menus that our pioneer ancestors experienced. However, in many historic towns, you can find at least one eatery, hopefully located in an original building from the era. If you've been fortunate enough to eat in one, please feel free to share it in the comments below. Well, folks, that's it for another episode. Thanks again for watching. And as always, please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you on down the trail.